Hi there. This is Dr. J. Kent Gregory, and I want to welcome you to Chapter 7, Torts, contained in the Legal and Ethical Environment of Business by Terence Lau and Lisa Johnson. With torts, this is one of the more important areas that have direct effects on businesses and individuals in their daily lives. So, as I discussed with last chapter, we're moving beyond kind of the background and the theory of law to actual, where the rubber hits the road and has direct effects on how businesses conduct their dealings, can protect themselves, uh, and same goes for individuals. So there's a lot of detail in this chapter, and so we'll be spending a lot of time with that. So for introductory purposes, a tort is a civil wrong, and it's other than a breach of contract. And it's any legally recognizable civil injury arising from the conduct or non-conduct, uh, because failing to act in some cases may be a tort, of persons or corporations. So here's a really great table that shows the differences between torts, contracts, and then criminal law. And I'm just going to focus on the torts part, but please do look at this. It's a great table put together, and it's in your book. So torts, the conduct is defined by jury and common law, and it's often codified in statute. The possible plaintiffs are anyone to whom a duty is owed, and the damages are compensatory and or punitive. And then the burden of proof is preponderance of the evidence. So that's actually very similar to what we see with contracts, but not similar to what we see with criminal law, where it's beyond a reasonable doubt. So a little bit of an introduction. In contract law, only people who are involved in a contract are those who are the, say, intended third-party beneficiary to contract can sue for the breach of contract. So that's not tort law, that's contract law and kind of sets up some differences here. Compensatory damages are money damages to compensate for economic losses or losses stemming from injuries. Punitive damages are money damages awarded to punish the defendant for gross and wanton negligence, and certainly to deter future wrongdoing, either on part of that defendant or future similar defendants. Uh, some other terms, negligence per se, pardon me, is negligence due to a criminal violation. The tortfeasor is the person who commits the tort, the tortfeasor, and respondeat superior. This is the doctrine that holds that employers are liable for tortious acts committed by employees while those employees are acting within the scope of their employment. Some further definitions. An intentional tort is a type of tort where the defendant acts with the intent to cause a particular outcome. So, uh, you know, pretty obvious what that means. Negligence is the breach of the duty of all persons as established by, say, state tort law. Uh, so the breach of duty of all persons to act reasonably and to exercise a reasonable amount of care in their dealings and interactions with others. So that's, keep in mind reasonable. And then strict liability is the liability that's imposed in certain situations without regard to fault or due care. And we'll be covering all of these later on in our discussion of Chapter 7. Okay, so to continue on with types of intentional torts. So battery is the completed assault. So battery is intentional, unconsented, unwanted, or offensive contact. So this is actually the completed assault. And as you can imagine, assault and battery are not always present together. And available defenses when sued for assault or battery can be consent, self-defense, or defense of others. And in this picture, clearly we have what would appear to be both assault, assault and battery, because he's got his hands on the guy. The guy's fearful, he doesn't like it. There we go. It does not appear to be consensual. And then there's the intentional infliction of emotional distress. So IIED. So this is extreme and outrageous conduct measured objectively that intentionally or recklessly causes severe emotional distress to another. Now, keep in mind, IIED, from a legal perspective, does not describe the rudeness of everyday life, right? So, everyday life, there's just you're going to come across jerks, right? So IIED does not really cover that. So, sometimes you have a bad day and you just run across a bunch of jerks, right? So you can't sue them for IIED. Well, you can, you just may not win in court. Although the standard for outrageous conduct is objective, the measurement is made against the particular sensitivities of the plaintiff. So that's an important note there, the particular insensitivities of the plaintiff. And so companies, so this is particularly important for us since we're business law class, they've got to be careful when handling sensitive employment situations to avoid this, right? And companies involved in a lot of public interactions should be careful of this tort as well, either in terms of how they market their product, the type of product it is, things that are said about the product or that they say about the product, and maybe even what is said by members or employees of the company. So to continue with some other types of intentional torts, the invasion of privacy. So from a legal perspective, this is the intrusion into the personal life of another without legal justification. So this can take the form of misappropriation, so intruding into that person's life by using their name, likeness, or identifying characteristic without their permission. Uh, Misappropriation also covers more than a photograph or drawing being used. It covers any likeness or identifying characteristic, just as we saw with this sort of pseudo Vanna White advertisement. Intrusion is the intentional intrusion onto on the seclusion or solitude of another in private matters. And then that the intrusion is offensive to a reasonable person and has caused mental anguish or distress. False light is another type of invasion of privacy where it gives publicity to a matter concerning someone that places that person in a false light and then which is offensive to a reasonable person. So this is the standard, offensive to a reasonable person. And then we'll wrap up types of intentional torts, or this part of the discussion, with false imprisonment. So this is intentionally confining or restraining another person's movement without justification. The kind of hedge on that, I should say, is shopkeeper's privilege, which allows businesses confronted with potential thieves to hold on to the suspects until the police arrive. And then there's trespass to land. This is intentional entry to land owned by another without a legal cause. And then you have to keep in mind attractive nuisance. This is any item or condition on a property that would be attractive and dangerous to children, even if the children are trespassing. So if you have an attractive nuisance, you have to put up enough uh, boundaries or protection or warnings to keep children away. So that ends part one, and we'll pick up with part two.